If you look in the inside of your bulletin, pages 4 and 5, you'll see that we're highlighting the lives of two young men who are going to be canonized next Sunday, September 7th, by Pope Leo. So to prepare for that, we're going to be preaching a little bit this week and next week about these two young men. Next week, it'll be Blessed Carlo Acutis. Today, I want to talk about Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, who by this time next week will be Saint Pier Giorgio. He was a young man who enjoyed life to the full, a mountain climber, a pipe smoker, as you can see from one of the pictures in there. He was a practical jokester who was the life of the party, but also was very devout. Pier Giorgio was born in 1901 and grew up in the town of Turin, Italy. He came from a very rich family, in fact, one of the wealthiest in all of Italy. His father was an Italian ambassador to Germany and was the owner of one of the major newspapers in Italy. His mother was an accomplished painter. The family had 3 homes in Turin alone, the smallest of which had 36 rooms. It's just 36 rooms, to give you an idea. So clearly, Pier Giorgio grew up with all surrounding him, butlers and maids and chauffeurs and assistants. But despite growing up in this environment, he saw his wealth a little differently and ended up surrounding himself with some very different people than the ones that he grew up with. When he was very young, a poor man came to his door asking for assistance from the family. The young Pier Giorgio instinctively took off his own shoes, gave them to the man. When his parents would buy him a first-class ticket on the train, he always would exchange it for a third-class ticket and give the difference to the poor. When he graduated high school, his father offered him to buy a car or the equivalent amount in money. He took the cash and gave it away to the poor. When he was asked by his friends, "Pier Giorgio, you're rich. Why are you riding third class on the train?" He responded, "Because there's no fourth class." Pier Giorgio was a member of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, of course, which we have here at our parish, very dedicated to the poor. By the time he was 21 years old, he was single-handedly supporting over 125 families and would pay for their rent, their clothing, food, and their school tuition. He even became the godfather to many of these poor to make sure they were receiving the sacraments. And he was doing all of this while using a different name so that none of them would know that he came from the Frassati family. When you are invited to a banquet, Jesus says, take the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he may say to you, "My friend, move up to a higher position." You see in this life of Pier Giorgio Frassati that my background makes me no better than anyone else. In fact, because God has given me so much, now I have so much more to return to him. It's an admonition of the reflection that we heard in the first reading from Sirach. The greater you are, humble yourself the more, and you will find favor with God. The virtue of humility. We see this constantly driven in all over the place in the Bible as something to strive for. Except there's a problem. You can't really strive for humility, because that would mean you're trying to attain something, you're trying to impress someone. We can only really know what humility is by its opposite, by what humility is not. Do not seek anything for yourself. Do not be focused on your rank in comparison with others. Don't try to push yourself up above others. And as Jesus says, when you give a banquet, do not invite your friends or relatives or wealthy neighbors, because they can repay you. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, who can't repay you with anything. You will be blessed because of that. Humility is to let yourself go down so low that the only thing that you want for yourself is God himself. Again, from the first reading, humble yourself the more, the greater you are, and you will find favor with God. What is too sublime for you, seek not. Into things beyond your reach, search not. Do not reach out for things beyond you. I'm blessed not only to serve in parish ministry as a pastor, but also to work in promoting priestly vocations. This past week, I was out of town at the National Convention for vocation directors throughout the country. These are priests who are essentially promoters of and recruiters for young men to the priesthood, as well as directors of seminarians. As a little background, between these two responsibilities that I have, between parish life and vocation work, the two can be incredibly different. As pastor of a parish, things usually are here very smooth sailing. Mass attendance and sacraments are always very consistent. Parish finances and collections are always very well. People are involved in parish ministry on a pretty predictable basis. Things here are very predictable, and there's very little ups and downs, volatility in parish life. Vocations work, on the other hand, is a little different. Young men who are thinking about the priesthood are not predictable, as you can probably imagine. The decision can change from day to day. So you, myself, or others could pour tons of time and energy into a handful of young men, and then all of a sudden, they could just back out at a moment's notice. So vocations work, unlike parish ministry, is filled with its ups and downs. And it can sometimes be more exhausting than anything that the parish life can throw at me. But this past week, there was a good reminder for me about who's in charge when it comes to this type of work and what my response should be. In one of the masses where all of us priests, there were at least 150 of us gathered together, there was a bishop who said this in his homily. He said this: "Vocation directors, you do not call a man to the priesthood. God does. The vocation does not depend upon you. It depends upon him." Which is, of course, something that I know, but something that I needed to hear again. What is too sublime for you, seek not. Into things beyond your strength, search not. Humility is the ability to say, there are things outside of my reach, outside of my control, and that's okay, because they're within God's reach and his control. And I'll let him handle it, and I'll just be the instrument that he wants to use me as. Pope St. John the 23rd, who was Pope about 60 years ago, is well known for saying this prayer at the end of each day: "Lord, it's your church, I'm going to bed." It's humility. Ultimately, I'm not in charge, God is. Pier Giorgio Frassati was caring for a sick person when he was 24 years old, and he contracted polio from that and tragically died just at the age of 84, July 4th, 1925. That was 100 years ago this year. At his funeral, the streets were packed with thousands of people, except it wasn't just the rich and educated people who knew Pier Giorgio and his family. Thousands of poor people also showed up. All the people who knew him because he ministered to them. At the funeral, the rich people looked at the poor people and said, "What are you doing here?" And the poor people looked at the rich people and said, "What are you doing here?" Because the poor didn't know who he really was, and the rich didn't know the secret that he was keeping. Because everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. Everyone who goes down low will be lifted up. Something that Pier Giorgio is well known for is the phrase that he wrote on a picture of himself climbing up a steep rock face. In Italian, what he wrote is "verso l'alto," which means "to the heights," referring not just to his love of mountain climbing, but also to his ascent to the mountain of God, which is kind of paradoxical when you think about it. To go up high, you must go down low. To be exalted, you must humble yourself. To hold on to something, you must let go. And to gain everything, you must give everything away. That's the path to God that is the most common thread in the lives of all the saints. Because humility is to forget about yourself and to let God alone be in charge. How is the Lord inviting you to embrace humility this week? Or maybe, how is the Lord inviting you to let go so that humility can embrace you? Maybe just a suggestion for this week, I invite everyone to do some research into the lives of these two young men who will be canonized as saints next week, Pier Giorgio and Carlo Acutis. Let's let the Lord be in charge of our life, and you will ascend verso l'alto, which is to the heights. Amen.